So continuing with our solving equations unit, we spent the past couple of days making sure we're really good at absolute value. And so today we're going to begin working on quadratics, which are going to look like something similar to this, but a little bit more complicated. So before we get into actually solving these equations, I want to talk about two things. The first is what 9 squared is. Well, we know 9 squared means I'm taking 9 times 9. So 9 squared is 81. Negative 9 squared. Negative 9 squared means I'm taking negative 9 times negative 9. And hey, that's also 81. Okay, keep those two things in the back of your mind. I can get 81 from 9 times 9, and I can get 81 from negative 9 times negative 9. And then we have to think about the square root of 81. What is the square root of 81? If you do that in your calculator, you're going to get 9. Well, there's a difference between having the square root symbol already there and then having to use the square root symbol to solve an equation. So let's go ahead and get started. These are the problems similar to what we're going to be solving. These are kind of basic though. So we need to think for a second. I need to get x by itself. Just like if we had something like this, I need to do the opposite operation. Here the opposite operation is subtraction. But what's the opposite operation if I have something that's squared? The opposite operation if I have something that's squared. Well, we just did it on the other page. We squared something, and so the opposite operation of squared is square root. I'm going to square root both sides. When I square root both sides, that x squared, this guy, disappears, leaving me with an x. Now the thing that happens when I square root both sides, I'm actually going to get two answers. And hopefully you kind of realize that in the example we just did. X is going to be equal to 9 and negative 9, because think about it. If I plugged 9 into this equation, is 9 squared 81? Well, 9 times 9, yeah, it is 81. That works. What about negative 9? Well, negative 9 times negative 9, yeah, that's also a positive 81. It works. And so for quadratic equations, there's always going to be two answers. Well, almost always. There's always exceptions, but there's always going to be two answers. One's going to be the positive and one's going to be the negative, because 9 times 9 gives me 81, but negative 9 times negative 9 also gives me 81. So let's go ahead and try the next one. Again, I want to get the x totally by itself, so I need to square root both sides. Always show this step. When you square root, your x's disappear, or your squared disappears, and you're left with x is equal to, the square root of 25 is 5, but you also know that negative 5 is going to get you back to 25, and you can always check your work. If I plugged 5 back into our equation, 5 times 5 does give me 25. What about negative 5? Negative 5 times negative 5, it also gives me 25. So both of these work, leaving me with the answers of x is equal to 5 and negative 5. Okay, so this next one you're like, oh, okay, this is easy. Let's go ahead and square root both sides. When I square root, again, my little exponent cancels, leaving me with just an x. And why don't you in your calculator right now type in square root of negative 16. Just real quick. Try it out. If you need to pause the video, go ahead and do it. And try square root of negative 16. I think you're going to notice that the calculator is going to say like error, or it's going to do something funky that tells you, uh-oh, I've typed something in that doesn't work. The reason this doesn't work is you can't square root a negative number. So just like the absolute value of x couldn't be negative 16, neither can x squared be a negative 16. Neither can x squared. X squared can't be a negative 16 either. So when you see your variable and exponent, your x squared equaling a negative number, you're not going to write no solution because there secretly is a solution. The solution is something called an imaginary number, which sounds like something Barney would say. It's called an imaginary number, which you'll learn about later. So when you have a quadratic equaling a negative number, if you could just write like a fancy I, because that's how you represent an imaginary number, just so I know that you can't square root that. Okay? So the two things I wanted you to take away before we actually do some bigger problems is there are always two solutions to quadratic equations. And when a quadratic is set equal to a negative number, the answer is imaginary. So you're going to write that fancy I. Okay? Let's do some real problems. Here's the first one I would like to do. Just like we had to get the absolute value by itself, before I can square root anything, I need to get the x squared by itself. So this is very similar to a two-step equation where I'm going to subtract 1 first. And I'm left with 2x squared is equal to 98. I'm then going to divide both sides by 2 because I still got to get the x squared by itself. And when I divide 92 by 2, I get 49. This guy's positive, so I know I can square root both sides. And I'm left with x is equal to, the square root of 49 is 7, so then you know negative 7 is also something that will work. And you just solved your first quadratic equation. Now this one's a little bit more complicated. I see my exponents right here. I want to get that by itself. I need to get this whole thing by itself before I can do anything. So I'm going to divide both sides by 2. This leaves me with x plus 1, quantity squared, and that's equal to 16. Now from here, I need to square root. I can't subtract 1 because this whole thing is squared. So I actually have to square root much earlier than we have in the other problems. When I square root both sides, this side becomes x plus 1. But this side, remember when I square root, I'm going to get a 4. But I'm also going to get a negative 4. So what this means right now is I have to set up two equations because x plus 1 is equal to 4, but x plus 1 is also equal to negative 4. Oops. I meant negative 4, but I wrote 14. Okay, these are the two equations I'm going to solve because remember, you're always going to get two answers. So minus 1, minus 1, minus 1, minus 1. So this I'm left with x is equal to 4 minus 1 is 3. This one x is equal to negative 4 minus 1 is a negative 5. So the answer to this quadratic equation was a little bit different than the last one. X is equal to negative 5 and 3. And I just like to write my answers in numerical order, but you don't have to. You don't have to do that. But this one, x was equal to negative 5 and positive 3. Here are the last two examples before I let you try some stuff on your own. With this one, again, I need to get the thing that's squared by itself. Right now, the thing that's squared has this connected to it. So I need to move him to the other side. And I have 2x to the squared power. And then I add 1, which is 16. Can't do anything from here until I square root. So now I'm just left with a 2x, and it's equal to, remember, 4 and a negative 4. So now I need to set up my two equations. 2x is equal to 4, but 2x is also equal to negative 4. You're going to divide both sides by 2. And so x is equal to 2, and x is equal to -2. And then I just like to write my answers together. I don't know about you, but I'm feeling 22. Okay. And then here's the last example that we're going to do. Let's switch colors. I'm going to do orange. Spice it up. Okay. So the thing that's being squared is actually already by itself. So you can, from here, just go ahead and immediately square root both sides. So this leaves me with just a 2x minus 1. The squared is the only thing that disappears. But remember, this is equal to 9 and also -9. So straight up from here, I need to write my two equations. Equal to 9, but 2x minus 1 is also equal to a -9. These are just two-step equations that you just solve out. So I'm going to add 1, add 1, add 1, add 1. I'm left with 2x is equal to 9 plus 1 is 10. 2x is equal to -9 plus 1 is -8. Divide by 2, everything. So this guy says that x is equal to 5, and this guy says that x is equal to -4. So I just, again, like to write my final answers together. I don't know why. It's just a thing I do. So x is equal to -4 and a +5. So what I want you to do from here, if you feel like you need to re-watch some of these examples, go ahead and do it. If you feel like you really get this and you want to try it on your own, come get it from me and I'll have you do it to see how it goes.